I'm very excited to record with you. I, had some followers message me like repeatedly saying, I'd love to see what your conversation with Naftali Moses would be like. You're an integrative speaker, you're a coach, you're a content creator. I'm very excited to welcome you. So Naftali Moses, welcome to Pretty Much Done.
Pretty Much Done.
That's my podcast.
That's
you didn't even know?
I knew you was Pretty Much Done, and then I was like, wait, what's your real name? And you said Julia.
Yeah.
I mean, thank you so much for having me. It sounds exciting. I thought it was a great name, Pretty Much Done.
I'm thinking I need a rebrand lately, but it's for people who are pretty much done listening to the societal noise and pressure around being single.
Oh, we're going to get along then.
I thought we were going to get into a spirited debate because we kind of did. We had a interview call. And I also told you upon looking at your socials, I thought you're pretty conservative. You have some kind of conservative viewpoints. You had some takes about me and my viewpoints, but I don't think that we're that different. I think that we're going to overlap on some stuff.
I'm excited. So let's see where...
I always like to set the tone for anyone listening of how does someone get to this point of they become a coach, they become, a speaker, a voice on the internet for dating, self-esteem. Run me through it. Also, I think what struck me most about you is you're 25. You don't sound and act like you're 25.
No.
How does a 25-year-old get into this line of work?
I told you I was going to be extra reflective today due to my knee pain.
Yeah, the knee pain that's storing the reflection.
Well, it's actually really interesting that I think that there's definitely a culture of people talking about things that they have no connection to. There's nothing wrong with that. If you're going to do it, follow through with it. And I think you'll just kind of realize how little you knew about it to begin with. And that's okay too. I feel it's just a question of what somebody asks what credibility is. And so I personally think that there's way too many coaches and too many people opening their mouth on the internet. Way too many. There's no shortage of it. I think that most coaches are trash. I think that goes for most therapists. I think that goes for most speakers. I actually don't think that they're connected to anything. I think that they just kind of like the feeling that they get. They have ability. There's capacity. There's no question about it. But to really be something is like a real question you should ask yourself. Like, do you actually want to be a coach? So then take everything that you teach to everybody else and experience those experiences. Don't create a psychological distance between the two. And guess what happens? Well, it's something that's kind of even happening to me today is I realized like what got me to the front door, I had to go deeper in order to keep going. And there were so many points throughout this where I could have just it's easy to fool people. Sell them on what they like to see. Give them a false sense of hope. They'll eat it up every day.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, well now this is a real question for me. And it was to ask myself this question, why am I doing this? I need a deeper connection to what that is. And I've had periods in my life where actually when this knee pain started, I was 24 and I was doing coaching at the time, but a lot of it was seduction. It was only working with men. It changed after I was able to actually, self-reflect, because then it, in a lot of ways, made me realize that my relationship with women was not something that I integrated, when that's something that I wanted in my life. So now it's actually a question of how do you help somebody if it's only based off of a projection that people get to see. If people's relationship with me is only through a camera, then I have to dive in deeper to bring out more aspects of me to really show them that they're naive to what growth really looks like and what it takes to be a coach, a black belt, a rabbi, a priest, a therapist, a doctor. Well, all of these things have to do with somebody's connection, that they personally feel that this is the very way that will help them reflect who they are. But when I started this, that was exactly the reason. Now, did I know everything at the time? No, my God, the experience itself taught me, it shaped me. And so much to the point that now it's actually holding my hand. I pushed the ball down the hill. It's built up its momentum. And now I'm realizing that I have to go with it. And it's actually taking me places that I would never go if I did not have this commitment. So I like to think of it this way. Why would you commit yourself to something because you want to be seen as powerful to then realize that actually this is a much deeper pursuit in your life and the whole notion of power has nothing to do with it. It has to do with the real reason with why you're here. And so if it does not align with that, maybe for a little bit you'll be able to realize the kind of imposter you are. But there's a certain point where push comes to shove and you're faced with the mirror and you really get to see if this is something in alignment with you and how authentic you are with this. To really have a voice is an expression of the person. It's the closest thing you have to somebody. People address it as your second face. To really have one, well, you need to be connected to something that is you.
Agreed. But what was that door opening for you? Because you're saying that you were a coach before you kind of went on this journey. How do you open the door to coaching? Especially We're both Jewish, like especially growing up in these Jewish cultures where doctor or lawyer is what's prescribed to us.
Doctor, lawyer, or therapist, or
Therapist was prescribed to you?
or academia.
Academia.
I wasn't. My parents were some of the most unique people I've ever met. Like you'll never meet anybody like my parents. They're completely outside the box thinkers. Actually, so much to the point that they left Orthodox Judaism. You know, they pulled me out of school and they said, "You're not learning anything about God. You're not learning anything about the Bible." In fact, actually, they're teaching you a distorted version of it, their interpretation of it, and it's a whole authority system that's actually disconnecting you from God. When I was hit with that, it was straight fear. So I wasn't raised to go to the college system. I was raised to think for myself, to speak for myself, and to let my experiences be something I learned from. Because there's no number on that. So yeah, there was a decision that I made. And it was actually for the first time I said, I no longer want to hold back the gifts that I know that I have. Because there's so many damn excuses as to why I don't do this. Well, I don't have a degree. I'm not a psychologist. I can't just go start helping people. I was like, well, those are the things that are told to the people that are the most capable. That you can't go ahead and do that. I would have to accept a false premise of 8 years to get a degree that's worth nothing. Because I'm the one coaching the psychologist. So, oh wow, it's smoky in here. I keep lighting the incense, so sometimes
I kind of like it. By the way, you were kind of clowning me on our initial call about my spirituality practice.
Oh, absolutely.
Delicately clowning me.
Delicately clowning. Yeah.
But for someone who is delicately clowning me and you have incense upon me entering your studio, that was a bit...
I don't associate it to spirituality. I like incense.
You just like the smell.
I like the atmosphere. I like the smell. I like the vibe. I like how it kind of adds a little more texture to the conversation, you know?
Yeah.
Get all the senses activated.
Yeah.
You're like, damn, this is great.
You're going to hypnotize me. I'm going to ask you the easy questions. No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding.
You're going to get into a trance soon, and then people are going to think I'm one of those guys, a cult leader.
Oh my God.
Not quite. Don't give me all the credit yet.
No, you left Orthodox Judaism.
Quite
the opposite. Not that Orthodox Judaism is a cult. So you started coaching people, you started coaching men on how to seduce women. Is that how it started?
So the way that I started this journey is actually really interesting. Most people don't know this, but I actually refuse social media as a means of operation. It was actually 2022 I started considering this. I've been my whole life been studying psychology. I knew more than any college psychologist professor. I always loved it. Yeah. It was like for me, and honestly, so many ways was a way that I was able to connect to religious thinking. Symbols, archetypes, the human mind, human nature, the biblical stories, actually really painting out human nature. And it was like I could see something that made this story make sense. It also made my life make sense. And I felt more connected to my life. Now, when that started to pick up, I had to make this choice. And it was, really, honestly, I don't know if I would have been able to do this if I did not make a decision in my life to do something that made me incredibly uncomfortable. But it wasn't what you think. This wasn't all right, be a coach or not. Make the jump.
Yeah, it wasn't that conscious, right? It wasn't like be uncomfortable.
No, it had to be personal. It started with journaling. I came out of a serious relationship. I was incredibly dissatisfied. I started losing my hair and developing a skin fungus, right? Wow. I was bearing so many emotions. I grew the beard out. I put the yarmulke on the top of my head just to make sure that you could see I'm Jewish. I hid behind virtue and morality. And there was something that did happen is I heard this voice in my head that said, are you a good person? Now, I can't say many people are lucky to get that, but there was something that did attribute to it. As I started going to jiu-jitsu. This was really interesting. When I started going to jiu-jitsu, I actually was faced with the one thing I was most terrified of: mistakes, failure, rejection. Maybe I'm not the best at this. I knew I wasn't the best at it. Actually, in fact, there were so many other things that I was better at, but this was the one thing that I knew I wasn't good at. And I would have tantrums every time I get attacked. But it was interesting. Every time I'd have the tantrum, something would open up. I would open up. So there was a series of things that would happen. Look, that's going to take a long time to get into, but I think that what happened fundamentally at the beginning is I realized I must stop hiding. There was so much of what I was hiding because I didn't feel that everybody would accept me for what I would have to give to the world. Somebody would have to say something about me. But I had to start. I had to start somewhere. At least, dress for the job you want.
Yeah.
And I started dressing for the job I want. Literally, suits is my favorite thing in the whole world. I bought an Armani suit for $1,000. My mom said, that's for your wedding day. And I said, no, that's for my everyday.
Cool.
And there were plenty of moments that I've had like that in my life. One of my first clients will always be your hardest. And it's a miracle that I actually didn't fuck it up, because that just goes to show that you really need to believe in your ability. And before you start anything, you're not just going to be given the easy. You're going to be given the hardest. My first client that I ever worked with was suicidal, alcoholic, terrible with women, and could not keep a job.
How'd you find him?
So you know, you say something enough times that you do this and you start to become more connected to that thing. People who are connected to value can see that in you. And so somebody reached out going, hey, this one guy, he needs help. And I said, okay, let's do it. And I don't know if you ever seen the movie Stupid Crazy Love.
Crazy Stupid Love.
Crazy Stupid
Love
Love.
that. Love. You were like the Ryan Gosling character?
I was the Ryan Gosling character. And I noticed that there is a fundamental gap in coaching, is that there's no human interaction. So what I would do is all of my stuff would be in person.
Cool.
People would fly out to work with me, and I would give them pretty much the Crazy Stupid Love experience. And I would level these people up. What was interesting, though, is that the more that I did this, the more I realized the synchronicity in the experiences. For me to realize that there was no such thing as just random people you met who paid your paychecks.
Yeah.
And so then that kind of like, it made me reflect in so many ways, because I was able to see how much people really hide what they have. And also throughout this process, I started to realize more and more that it was not so much just about the seduction, how to talk to the girl, getting rejected, going to the mall, dressing differently, whatever it was. It was really about helping a person unveil the layers that they've kept between themselves the whole time. And so then there was a certain point in my life, and it's interesting you say this, because I knew I was gifted. I knew I had something. I knew I can speak. It's my name, Naftali, if you're familiar with the Hebrew interpretation
No, but
of the name.
tell us, what is it? What does it mean?
It means deliverer of beautiful sayings.
Love that.
A hind let loose. And that's not the literal definition of the name. The literal definition of the name means my struggler, my wrestler. And so I definitely think that's also there too.
Mm-hmm. Walk me through what people were hiding. Like, walk me through a client, to relate it back to dating, of like, what are we hiding behind? Mm-hmm. And give me like an example of a client that you've worked with and what they were hiding and what we're probably more prone to hide most.
I was really, at the time, I was really good at externalizing the experiences, right? I would see somebody struggle and I would create like an external prescription to interact with the internal struggle. I realized that actually it was more difficult for me to interact with the internal struggle because I myself was like internally distant. Actually, it was something interesting because I could tell you what I was hiding, and I was hiding myself from the world. That most people wouldn't think that I'm like a professional, who actually have seen my content would go like, dude, you're like a natural at this. Like, no, I wasn't. You know what it took for me to get in front of a camera to have this conversation with you?
What?
It took me 60 grand of an actor's package compounded with a whole production team.
Wow.
To help coach me to shoot 30 short form videos. And you might go, you paid 60 grand for that?
I am saying that mentally.
Yeah, I paid 60 grand to actually become familiar with what I'd be willing to give to be connected to this, because this gives me a whole lot more than 60 grand.
Yeah.
So I knew that. I knew that then. That's also what I think people are fundamentally forgetting. You don't have all the answers. All you need is the belief. So I made what you would think is a crazy investment, probably the best investment I ever made in my life. I'd get nervous on camera. I'd break down. Most people don't know that. You know, what you're seeing is what you call your projection of what you think strength is, because you're so naive to what allows it to really exist. This is true for men and for women. This does create what you call a cultural interrupt, is that people are so disconnected from what it really takes, is it takes truth. But to integrate truth into an unideal reality takes strength. Most people don't know how that works. So most of our dating culture is illusory, doesn't exist. Most people who see how hard work looks are not really given the real story.
How do people figure that out? Like, give us like a step-by-step, because people are single, they're listening to this and they're like, how do I get better at dating? I even do this, like I told you, I'm a double Virgo, and I self-analyze and I'm constantly prescribing myself. I'm like, what are my blocks? And then I like start to just...
Is that quantified by being a double Virgo or by being you?
This is all my quantification. I'm obviously not a professional in this field. I'm not an astrologist, but like, I think I fixate. And I think what I'm resonating with for you is like, I think why I'm fixating is because I know how to psychoanalyze. That is my default mechanism. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Instead of probably going to do something that scares me or doing the thing that I'm resisting most. And maybe that's vulnerability. I don't know. That
was actually really well said. You actually, you, and this is something I experienced with you, is you psychologically like to experience things, not to experience those things, right? And it's like, we do that all the time. It's like, I'd much rather interact with the psychological quantification of what it takes to be vulnerable than to be vulnerable. Because the experience of vulnerability is personal. And by the way, reality binding, it grounds you. Like, you're now experiencing your life. It's one thing to talk about what it's worthy to be pulling Sir Arthur's sword from the stone. It's another thing to lift it from the stone.
Totally.
Right? And so, I mean, you can actually attribute that to one of the things that I know you really wanted to talk about, which I love talking about too, which is the disconnect in relationships. And so this is actually something I wanted to do. Is like, the practical no longer is functional. I'll tell you why the practical is no longer functional. Because
Can you say it in layman's terms? Like, okay, practical.
I'll speak, and
Yeah.
for example, you're like, oh, what are some few things that somebody can do to get good at dating? It's
Yeah.
like, think. That's one of them. Now, I'm being honest with you. Like, most people don't think. You would also need to have awareness. Most people don't have awareness. You would also need to be confrontational. Most people don't have that ability.
Well, I think the ability to be confrontational comes from self-esteem, and I think that's where I come in. I think most is I'm someone who grew up overweight. I even think about the vulnerability piece. Like when we were kids, we were vulnerable. We were fully ourselves, and then what did society tell us? Like we got bullied for it. So then we created these patterns in order to keep ourselves safe with time.
When you were kids, you're also kids. But
Yeah.
there's something incredibly divine about the child that's in all of us. Is, will be. Pretty cool.
Yeah, I think it's the essence of us.
Of course.
Yeah.
But that's exactly what makes it valuable. It's not that you remain one. It's that you integrate that into your life. But don't think that that's not going to have to challenge cultural lies, societal lies, religious lies.
Of course.
So every individual has to accept that responsibility. And so that's number one. Like, okay, you want to be better at dating? Accept the responsibility of your life. And I promise you'll know what it is you'll know what it is to show up to a relationship, and you'll understand the responsibility of that.
What's the responsibility of your life?
Oh my God. Oh my God.
Or I guess most of my listeners are females, millennial females, right?
Or they'll love me or burn me at the stake, whichever one.
I don't know. I think they're going to be open to the feedback, because I think the amazing thing about millennial women.
Yeah, they're fucked. They're really fucked. They're really fucked. I'll tell you why they're fucked.
Okay, let's go.
They're at a period of time where the culture made them believe that these ideas and ideologies would actually serve them.
Which ideas and ideologies?
Look, I could tell you something about millennials in general. I think that they're kind of raised with an ideology that a lot of the culture that you have is actually something that you could adopt in your life. The answer is no. You can't adopt that kind of culture.
Like what?
When you categorize it into millennials, I usually think about people from a particular age group.
I'm 31. I'm a millennial woman.
Yeah.
You're talking to the source.
I think that, majority of millennials are going to not only not have relationships, that a percentage of them are also going to die without children. And
Did you see the Wall Street Journal article that recently came out that said that millennials are just like grown-ups who are still kids, like they're not growing up?
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And I think it's like, okay, what quantifies growing up? Being able to see the reality that challenges everything about the fantasy you hold on to. Like, for example, most millennials still aren't to the idea that, having a college education means you know something. And I could tell it, and just by the way that they speak. They're typically raised and fostered to believe that that path is going to have results, right? Until eventually you realize it doesn't have results.
Yeah.
Also, another path is that you can kind of adopt the modern idea that without having a man very connected to his masculinity and a woman connected to that and an understanding of those roles being connected to a bigger truth, you're fucked, right? And the only reason why I'm saying you're fucked is because you don't really have a foundation of truth. And so now here's what happens is that actually, I think that they were fed at the peak of delusion, which is, and I mean at the peak of delusion, because nothing challenged it. They didn't have any reality to kind of rattle that boat. No, they were actually never confronted about the way that they thought, and they were rewarded for the way that they thought until it manifested in their lives. But it's difficult to let go of that. It's really difficult.
Were we rewarded for the way that we thought?
I wouldn't say rewarded. I would just say not challenged.
Yeah, I mean, here's what I think happened, and this is obviously going to be the point where we disagree. So it's fine. I'm a 31-year-old single woman who also maybe believes in a fantasy that may not.
What do you
true.
attribute your singleness to?
I think mine personally, I don't know if this is like a generalization, but I think that I spent the majority of my 20s looking for very good on paper relationships, and I was focused on qualities that were not maybe resonating with my soul. Mm-hmm. They were very superficial, and I spent a lot of my 20s trying to validate my self-worth through the lens of other people and being in relationship. Mm-hmm. And then I decided, once I turned 30 and I was still single and didn't have the marriage and kids, I was like, what is it that I want? And I started to learn that the things I wanted were maybe not the white picket fence life or the life that a lot of people around me were starting to follow.
Well, that's a great way to start, especially if we're talking about people in their 30s, which is a big one.
Yeah.
You're not the story you tell yourself about who you want to be and who you should be. You're in the actions that you reject about yourself. And like, for example, you're like, on paper, I'm looking for this guy, but you don't have anything that excites you about him.
Right.
So, no, I'll tell you who you're excited by. It's the guy that you had a one-night stand with at a bar.
Not me.
Well, I'm speaking.
Are we talking about a 20-year-old or someone who just like had?
That'd be cool too. But I want you to be able to, and for anybody who's listening, to be able to realize that we fall into the lot of the what you should, and we neglect what you are.
Right.
Now, if you neglect what you are,
yeah,
then what makes you think that your needs will be met when you interact with what you should?
Yeah.
Let me tell you what'll happen. You'll create a fantasy of a life, and you'll pitch that to your children if you have children.
Yeah.
And because that's also the thing about children is that, they'll bring up a lot of the things that you try to hide in the relationship. Well, they'll come up instantly. And if they don't show up in you, they'll show up in your kids.
Yep.
So sometimes it's like foolproof accountability. Like, you cannot run from the parts of you that you have rejected and refused to love.
Yeah.
So it's not so much just what you tell yourself you want. It's what you really want is what you interact with.
Yeah, and I think it's exacerbated by, imagine the biological clock and the societal noise. So like...
Societal noise?
Yeah, it's like women should get married and have kids by the time they're 30 or else they're unvaluable.
That's not in society. That's not in our culture.
All right. Well, I would like to tell you about an experience I had where I spoke about my life as a 29-year-old single woman, enjoying my Saturday, making shakshuka, watching reality TV, and Candace Owens and Matt Walsh came after me and said that my life is meaningless. So I do think that is in society.
I think that's Candace Owens and Matt Walsh. I mean, that's part of conservative ideology.
Which is 50%. I mean, we just saw in this election, there's like 50% of America who believe and want to almost go back to conservative ideologies.
I think people don't want what they got from the alternative.
Yes.
And that shows a sign of what you call that there is redemption. And let's be fair. I think most people have spoken. The results have spoken.
Sure.
Right? The people don't want whatever that was. Fair enough. That's not actually part of our culture. Our culture is an opposition of marriage and children. You have to look at how men and women have been shaped. They're not there to tend to one another or support each other. They're there to conquer each other and be the means of validation. That's what our culture is reflective of. You could see it in our film. You could see it in our art. There's no appreciation or respect for the opposite sex. In fact, actually, the way you empower women is by degrading men, and the way men empower themselves is by degrading women. So let me make it really quick. That we're sailing in boats in the complete opposite direction, and we're the two sums of one whole. I already know how the story is going to go. Is that we're going to have to, make a U-turn with both of those boats and then go back in the same direction. Also, first off, for somebody to say that your life is meaningless when they know nothing about you. Totally. It's like you're a little quick to jumping the gun. Your life is not meaningless. Yeah. They're trying to, the problem with their narrative is not the narrative. I'm not concerned about the narrative. I'm concerned about the truth that's important for women to be connected to. Is that, look, if, for example, all of your meaning only comes from that, well then, you're already triggering people's insecurities. It's just really a way to just kind of diminish what even somebody else has created around it. And also, you're playing into the fundamental insecurities we all share. Like, hey, if I go to the Orthodox community, I'm 25. Yeah. I'm fucking 5 years too old, sure. Right? So, when we start holding on to these things, we actually don't connect to our lives. And truth be told, you can't really trigger somebody who's really connected to their life. If they come to me like, "Oh, you're not married." Yeah, I'm not married. And they're like, "Why are you not married?" Well, I didn't want to settle for less. Okay. Fair enough, right? And then, but for example, what they were talking about was not what you heard. Part of our culture does not say that. And people can, if they're in religious environments, they inflict the same wound that the culture does. Do you see the problem there? Because it has no concern about the individual or truth at all. I believe it's more concerned about an ideology that allows them to be protected from the very thing that challenges them. The truth is bigger than us. It requires humility. And I actually really like this part of the conversation because you're bringing it into a bigger perspective. You're bringing it into like a societal, cultural point of view. And it's actually quite interesting. But again, I don't think that's part of our culture. I think women are being taught to reject their nature, to reject their fundamental instincts. And I think if you teach women to do that, you seriously hurt them. So per your belief, is it then like, we've got women in their 30s who are rejecting that, I'm even someone who I'm contemplating whether I want children or not. I also debate if there's like one person for the rest of our lives. So I'm in this bucket, right, of these women in their 30s. And then do you think the alternative is a woman who has a husband, has children? Like, are those the two kind of options? No, I don't see it that way at all.
Tell me how you see it.
I see it as two people completely divided from their fundamental nature. And the ones that claim they're connected to this are not really connected to that because look at their divorce rate and how and by the way, infidelity is like.
I want to talk about that too.
You can't track the infidelity, but it's about 80%.
In LA, I think it's like 100. It's
I'm
crazy.
not fucking around when I say that, because most people's definition of infidelity is purely sex with another person.
Yeah.
Like if we're going to use that as what you call infidelity, then okay, then maybe I'll be willing to say 60%. But let's be honest, there's so many other ways of doing that. And none of these things go accounted for, because of course we do not have a fundamental value system that actually is rooted in something that brings men and women together, not averts each other. It's very difficult to be a woman. It's very difficult to be a man. Nobody said that was easy. Welcome to life. But I don't fundamentally see that there's any virtue in somebody who's run into one way of thinking and a version of another. I just think that more of, there's lies in both. There's lies in both. And I think it's very difficult to be able to discern that, like, because there's lies in the way that that person is living their life, I should diminish what it is to have children and have a family, right? And to be able to seek one man. I would recommend that to any woman, absolutely. Unfortunately, the way that's being gone about is not the way that's really reflecting it appropriately, right? If that could only exist under false premises, then I don't think that works either.
What are you thinking? You're thinking that women are male bashing and becoming so hyper independent? What's your concern?
Well, you're bringing more clarity to something I've actually been wanting to get deeper into. So this is really awesome. Thank you for this. I really appreciate it.
What do you think is coming about as a result? Like, what is your concern about the way people are dating now regarding women? And then I want to touch on men, because I think that there are things that men are doing that are making it hard to find these like great guys, which, by the way, I think when I started on this platform, I realized that the way to rile up a dating audience is to bash men. Like, I used to be like, you know, a guy didn't open the door for me.
Yeah, I mean, millennial women love that. But that's for example, you make a majority of my clientele, which is great. I'm really rich. But think of it this way, though. You've been told a fundamental lie that you've been holding on to, and your only empowerment is in relationship to what you call actually the bitterness and contempt that you have towards men. That right there diminishes the woman.
100%. And then I also think that like the words we speak become the house that we live in. So if you are saying all men are shit and I'm never going to meet anyone, men are never going to level up, you live in that house. Like, that's where you're going to live. You're going to meet women who feel the same way. I've turned a leaf in my world where I believe, and I see evidence of it. I have great guy friends. I have wonderful people I've had on my podcast who are wonderful guys. And I've gone on dates with wonderful guys. They're just not what my soul wants, and that's totally fine. And I know, like, as I go on this journey, like I'll get closer and I'll find that person.
What if you're disconnected from that?
It's possible.
Yeah.
I'm here. Tell me.
I think that's a really good question, right? Because I don't think women should be planning to be single in their 30s.
I don't think anyone plans for it. If I'm honest, I think that
you have to pursue this relationship, but it's a relationship that has to have what you call a truthful aspect to it, right? You can't pursue a delusional idea. You're going to be older, holding on to the same delusional idea.
What's the delusional idea?
Oh, and it's that women aren't going to have to really start working on connecting to their nature as young as they can and see their resistance in relationship to being a mother and a wife. If they don't interact with that, and also, by the way, being feminine is not something you just connect to. Like, for example, you look at a majority of men out here. Fatherless homes is pretty much a product of that. Broken homes is a product of that.
Yeah.
You know, you really can't create masculine men when they have no understanding of what that is. They're going to what you call mimic competence. So you have a lot of people, you know, kind of acting an act of what they would think is a powerful persona, but then their whole persona becomes the manifestation of their insecurity. So they don't exist as a person. So as long as they keep distance from everybody, they can exist as this man. That's not a man. That's a projection. And it's a childish, juvenile projection that most people who aren't men believe, right? So now, women have a very interesting component here, and it's that thinking that being separated from your feminine nature is going to allow you to develop healthy relationships is exactly the lie that you've been told. You have to work at it, just like a man does. It's not something easy. Let me explain how difficult it is, actually. It's difficult to the point that if I were to tell you, you had to become a world-class athlete is difficult. There's so many insecurities around it. Being a woman is an incredibly vulnerable experience. Think of it this way. If you're agreeing to submit to a high-quality man, if you can find one, you're agreeing to follow him wherever he goes. Talk about vulnerability, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Now, if you're interacting with us when you're 30, or you're interacting with this when you're 16, who do you think's more likely to meet a high quality guy?
You're going to say a 16-year-old?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Well, I'll also tell you another reason, is that if you're learning how to date when you're 30, then maybe you date a guy, now you're 35. Now you're going to have children. You see how now it's like and also men and women are different in this regard. The reproductive window now, you got another 6-7 years, if you're lucky.
I think that what you're saying, let's use a 20-year-old. She may be more willing.
She's already late. And I'm not saying this, I'm not being purposely controversial here.
Okay, what age do you want to use? Just so I can...
How old is Alice in Alice in Wonderland?
I don't know.
She's 10.
Jesus.
Yeah. What's the rabbit symbolize?
I don't know.
Fertility.
Oh.
It's clicking. Tick tock, tick tock, tick tock. Where does that make her go? Down the rabbit hole. What does she get to see the manifestation of? Her naivete. Most women are cripplingly naive to their own nature, and they think that they could tend to a man. Guess what? You have your hands tied behind your back if you're like that. So she does go down the rabbit hole. What does she see? A manifestation of what she's going to be like. The Queen of Hearts. If she doesn't integrate this part of her that needs attention, then everything is going to be about validating the worst of her character.
Well, I've never psychoanalyzed Alice in Wonderland like
because
this.
We don't psychoanalyze movies, we experience them and they shape us. They're no longer in our culture. Guess what? Matt Walsh and Kansas Owen, maybe they have some things to talk about. But if they can't talk about the fundamental things that showed up in our culture, then our youth is deteriorating. I'm familiar with our culture more than anything. I can't go to the fucking movie theaters nowadays. I wanted to gouge my eyes out because the stories they're telling are disconnected from reality, and that disconnects us from it. And by the way, most people like that because they've made commitments to delusion. But besides, she's the Queen of Hearts, and that's what she sees in herself. And what does she marry? A bitch of a king. He can't tell her anything. He can't keep her safe, not even from her own vices. And then she wakes up. And of course, it's tea time with, what it looks like is her mother. And she goes, Alice, you fell asleep. Where were you? And it was like, actually, it was the story she was being read, was now internalized, that caused her to reflect on her own nature as a woman. And my God, if you don't do that for women, actually, I'll let women identify this. How does it look on the men you have in your life that don't interact with their nature? Guess what? They repress it. And they become predators. It's nothing pretty about this.
Okay, so here's what happens. So going back, I think that an 18-year-old is naive and she's more willing to be subservient to a man or whatever because
naive?
Not naive, I guess open. She's open. She hasn't had life experiences where she's felt hurt by a man. She doesn't have that life experience. A 30-year-old has way more life.
You can have a shit dad and you'll feel that way. I wouldn't just eliminate. Most people's negative experiences are in their childhood, unfortunately,
I hear you. I think what happened, I think that even as you were describing where I should be going, I'm thinking in my head, here's how I'm psychoanalyzing. I'm thinking, you're telling me I have to cater to a man, be more feminine, step into my feminine, do the work that is stepping into my feminine.
Very difficult work.
Difficult work. It takes work. I'm working on myself constantly. Maybe I'm going for a guy who I'm hoping he's doing the work too. So I'm hopefully meeting my equal. We just talked about infidelity. Opening yourself up to being hurt by a man, spending your life focused on him and his needs, maybe not your whole life, but a majority of your life really dedicating yourself to him. I just read Bill Gates says the biggest mistake of his life was divorcing Melinda Gates in 2021. You spend all your life devoted to this guy, and then where does that leave you? Single. So you're so I think the apprehension is this going to be worth it? What is he bringing to the table? And I do think, as much as I do know wonderful men, a majority of men are not working on themselves the same way that women are.
That's not true.
Tell me.
It's very saddening because it's what you're talking is disheartening for more than one reason. What you described as a fundamental vulnerability of a woman. What if he misleads you?
Yeah.
What if everything that you give him is not even appreciated or respected? What does this bring up? And I would only hope that it brings up something negative. Because of course, that's your insecurity in relationship to that part of yourself. How about this as a man? You work your ass off. You give everything that you can to your family. Mm-hmm. You show up to a woman, but she doesn't appreciate you. Mm-hmm. All of your hard work and efforts are not appreciated. Under your own house, you're disrespected. And she fucks the pool guy. So what am I really talking about here? If most people put their ego on this story, they will never grow as a person. I need you to listen to the vulnerabilities we both share as men and women.
Yeah.
But the right answer remains. What I'm saying, what's true for us, we have to connect with. The point isn't to tell men that that can't happen. The point is to tell men, have you ever read the Adam and Eve story? I mean, like, that's disconnected from our culture. I mean, if you raised young boys and girls with that story, men would have an awareness that all it takes is one wink and, hey, you want some of this, and his teeth are deep into that fruit.
Yeah.
Right? What did it take? Do you think men like that story? I didn't like that story the first time I heard it. I actually separated myself from the story until I was Adam. And it's like, well, what does Adam do? Well, actually, if you start with Eve, and I think that's a much better place to start, the fundamental vulnerabilities that women have to security is because they are fundamentally more vulnerable just due to the design.
Yeah.
Just due to design. That means that narratives of security are going to seduce you like a motherfucker. And if you're not aware that those narratives of security are going to seduce you, let me tell you what it tells you. What the snake tells you. A distortion of something. But it feeds into something you can't quite understand. It'll tell you something you can't quite understand. Some women like to take this fruit, and it's no better. And it's the fruit of, you could become a wife and a mother and a doctor at the same time. I don't know if anybody's been around children or have actually had a husband that's very masculine. And by the way, the more masculine he is, you guys are going to love this. He's going to need a lot of your attention. So guess what? You can both be needy with each other. Something kind of cute about that, by the way. And besides, it tells you something that you can be like God. That there's something beyond this relationship with your partner that you don't need that can make you godlike. And a lot of women take that. That's part of our culture. And it's the culture of, your liberation exists if your boss hires you. But if you work for your husband, it's prison. Right? It's like, that's a bad thing to be telling women. But let me also tell you something. If women aren't aware of their fundamental vulnerability to their own, what you call neurotic, fear-driven way of being, by the way, that's true for women, you're going to naturally be more afraid. You're going to need more attention and security because of that. But if you're not aware of where to get your security from, you know where you're hanging around. Snakes and forbidden fruit.
Yeah.
And it's just a matter of time. And if you bite onto that, men are susceptible to you. And that's what I think is delusional for most women to think, is like, you have more power than you could possibly imagine.
If you are confident in yourself.
No.
What?
If you're connected to your feminine nature. You're not aware of the influence you have on your partner. The story of Beauty and the Beast is not a story of, I need to change who he is. It's a story of the power of beauty and how that inspires the best in man. It brings the prince out of a beast. Mm. And it was what always was there, of course. The movie's deeply profound. These are stories, I believe maybe you grew up with too, the same way I grew up with them. But there was a certain point in the culture that let people hold on to these stories and hold on to their delusion at the same time. I could say I was fortunate enough in my life to be able to realize, I saw what happened to my older brothers.
What happened?
In a lot of ways, I saw how much they loved the security of the false narrative. They loved it.
Yeah.
There's so much security there. Of course, it tells you can be like God, but it's not real. It's deteriorative of paradise, right? You know how hard it is to exist with our humanity, our inadequacies, our insecurities? And despite that, we're worthy of unconditional love and paradise? Most people fuck their lives up, not because they're a fuck up, but because they don't believe that they could experience everything that they have in their life that's good. Because of course there's a fundamental insecurity that we believe we need to reject and not experience it. It's natural for us to want to do that. That's part of understanding human nature. Mm-hmm. But here, look, I'll just kind of tell you the rest of the story because most people are not familiar with it. This is the foundation for what allows anything to be built, is a man and a woman. And that's like the first story. There's creation and then Adam and Eve. But what ends up happening is to also show you the ugly of both. And I'll tell you where it comes out.
Yeah.
The vulnerabilities of both is her vulnerability is the snake, which is the narrative of protection. His vulnerability is her. That's kind of, when you think of it that way, you're like, oh shit, this makes a whole lot more sense why men are kind of like this, why naturally kind of like this. If they're not naive, by the way.
Yeah.
You could really tell a naive guy who's like, me, I want to get married. It's like, you know nothing about female nature. If you actually investigated it, you'd realize this is going to challenge the fuck out of me, right?
Yeah. I think that the mask that men can wear in order to do the superficial, I want to get married, I want to have this life, men can be successful, have money, women are going to want them. For the most part, I like to generalize. Let me run with
I'll
it.
let you say your point for sure.
Let me run with it. And then women have to be beautiful. and take care of themselves for the most part, okay? Generalizing. You invest as a woman in this relationship, you've got diminishing returns. Guys are only looking up and up. And this is also a negative take, but I'm just going to say, I'm just factoring in why there are fears around the vulnerability.
Because it's the most challenging thing about our lives. You're going to feel immediate and complete self-consciousness in relationship to your vulnerabilities. And that's
Resistance.
the next thing. So what happens to Adam and Eve? Now they're what you call, God goes, why are you hiding? Right? What happens is they became, once they ate of the fruit, they become aware of their nakedness, right? Well, another word for nakedness is vulnerabilities, right? Like, I mean, fucking hell, when you're naked, you're really vulnerable, right? What did they feel? Self-conscious. They hid. Well, like from God? Like, come on, your first generation existence, that's really real, right? Who does she blame? The snake. Who does he blame? His woman. What are they both exposed to now that they ate of the fruit? Reality. And the reality is for women, men will rule over you. It's a scary one. Women don't like that. Truth be told, you're either listening to honest men that care about you or dishonest men who want to use you. There's no in between. So that was told by men will rule over you, which is, yes, the dominant force in the cosmos. We lead the way. Believe me, that makes you happy as women. You don't want to lead the way. And you want to have belief that your partner will lead the way, right?
Yeah,
and his
I vibe with that.
vulnerabilities are very interesting. Not only in childbirth, you will suffer, which is another thing to understand, is that like there's a tremendously sacrificial component in relationship to childbirth and femininity. You're almost risking your life in order to give life back.
Yeah.
I mean, we can only say that we're fortunate enough to be able to do that without people having to die, but that's another vulnerability for women. Childbirth, not just in relationship to you giving birth to them, but for you holding that baby for 9 months. Your whole body is not designed. It is designed to hold the life, but not to protect itself and hold the life.
Yeah.
So again, pointing to more vulnerabilities about what? We need each other. The masculine and feminine story is a story about mankind in relationship to each other. You know that. Like, we have to connect to these things. If this is not the foundation by which people are actually starting to interact with dating, I'm just going to give you a whole list of things that you're going to use to continue to be the psychopath that you are, that you have no awareness of. Now, the next thing that's told to Adam is what? What's the vulnerability of men? Blood, sweat, and tears you're going to work. And from dust you are made, dust you will return. So before you go ahead and think you're going to create any monument that will allow you to exist through time, you're made of dust, right? Like, you know how much men like to hear that? In fact, actually, you would like the psychology behind this. Men are so terrified of that they utilize women to avoid that.
Yeah, I get that.
And achievement too. It's hard. It's fucking hard. But what did it show to both men and women? This is hard. Now into the real world, right? And the real world requires you to address those things, not neglect them.
I think what you're proposing, though, is we all get on board. Let's say you've got 50 women here. And they're like, fine, I'm going to listen to Naftali. I'm going to be feminine. I'm going to have a baby. I'm going to be, submissive and subservient to this man. You're also expecting that the 50 men are going to get on board too. I'm telling you, they're getting on board for like a couple months, a couple years. They're putting up the charade and then they're cheating. I don't know. I'm sorry, but like...
First off, and that's also true for women, they're going to put up the charade and then they're cheating. And when I say cheating, I just mean infidelity. I mean that they're
just
betraying
straying,
themselves.
bored,
They're straying.
unhappy.
Yes, you're totally correct. That's true for both men and women. What you address there exists for both men and women. So the topic of the conversation is much deeper than what's being portrayed to people. A false sense of hope keeps people clicking on the next YouTube video. Reality perhaps maybe pushes them away. But I'll tell you one thing. When people are thinking, it feels good. Because now you're feeling life. Something got activated. Something woke up. You're thinking on a deeper level. Do you know what makes me happy? It's that there's more. More for me to give. More for me to become.
Yeah.
Oh my God, if I
agree.
held on to this, I'd suffocate.
Yeah.
But I think it's interesting because I work with men and women.
Yeah.
And I know the 50 guys because I work with them, and I know the 50 girls. And I can tell you the ones that really make the difference and actually have the thing that changes the world are the ones that believe that there's something beyond themselves. That fundamental belief is much more than that. And actually, I challenge most of the women that come to my group. I'm ready, I'm down. I'm like, you're not ready, you're not down. How am I not ready? How am I not down? Your whole life is a manifestation of your own self-hatred of a particular part of yourself that you are.
A mother.
It exists for all women. It exists for all men.
Is that, you were saying that factor, being a mother?
Mother and wife?
Yeah.
Sister, daughter?
Oh, so if you're talking to a woman right now who's sitting here saying, I'm happy single, you would say she's lying?
You're happy single? What a word. What kind of terminology would you use? I'm happy single.
I'm happy being single.
I mean, I'd recommend this to anybody. You can be content with yourself, but there's a fundamental fault in that argument. 9 out of 10 times, it's what you call cope. When a person goes, I'm happy being single and I'm in my 30s, it's like, one second. It's one thing to feel, because I'm very fulfilled with my life. I'm very connected.
Yeah.
I'm very happy being single. But I didn't say I am okay with it. I struggle all the time with it.
You want to meet someone.
Because you have to remember, the fundamental nature of men and women is that we are one. I'm fundamentally living a lie. Now, that's maybe a little bit harsh, but I do understand the importance of, I'm exposed to my vulnerabilities. The cold side of the bed. Perhaps sometimes the loneliness. The sadness that comes with that.
The cold side of the bed was not what I thought would be your first one, but I like, it's funny. Yeah.
No, that's a very real thing. Actually, in fact, the people that can interact with that part of themselves have a tremendous amount of humanity. But I mean, when a girl that's single in her 30s says, I'm super happy being single, I just think for the first time you experienced a connection with yourself. This is the beginning of extending that connection outside of you. Don't close the door.
Yeah.
You become happy in that circle. That's self-destructive in the name of happy. And so many people love to tell themselves that lie, that they are. The whole point isn't that I want you to be content with yourself.
Yeah.
If you are, you could share that with others.
Yeah.
But you see, the problem with that is it's conclusive. I'm happy single. And what else do you mean by that? Oh, okay, I get it. That you mean that actually you don't need a relationship. Well, now you're delusional.
Can I ask you about something like a little funnier, lighter?
Sure, please.
How do you feel about dating apps?
I don't like them. I don't like them personally.
Do you feel like they're on their way out? I think we're done.
I think they're on their way out because more people are getting what you call free dopamine hits from it and realizing they never really cared about connection to begin with.
Yeah.
And I've seen this with people. It's like, I don't have a dating app. I just do it for the fun. Oh, you do it for the fun? Okay, let me actually relabel that for you. You're a psychotic and you like to use people as a sense of validation. And now actually women have evolved to a point, you don't need to sleep with a guy anymore. You already got the yes. That's not a good thing. You know, like, again, playing into the vulnerability thing, like, people need to have sex. Like, that's a need. Mm-hmm. Now, that need has been distorted, too, because people's representation of it is the usage of sex for liberation. That's not what sex is for. It's for connection.
Yeah.
There's
I
liberation
think
in it.
Connection. I think people are just using it to get off. I don't think it's like
They're
liberation.
just using it to get off. They're using it to get off. And,
maybe validate themselves in some way of like, oh, I slept with this hot person.
Yeah, I slept with this hot person and I met them through this. And the best part about the dating app is you get to reject as many people as you like, as you never get to see how many times you're rejected.
Yeah.
That does not develop somebody with an esteem or a connection to their values or an understanding of who they are. That kind of creates a narcissist, if you really think about it.
Wow, yeah.
Give them everything that they want at all points and never see at a point at which they lose. They're going to think the whole world revolves around themselves. And I think that that's partially due to our culture. It's very highly narcissistic.
What do you coach people? What's like your first thing that you're like, here's where you're falling short. Here's what, there's really a girl who's in your program or a guy who's in your program and they're like, I want it. And you believe them. They do want it. What's like the one step someone has to take first?
Always read the client. I always read the client. And in the first 5 seconds, I know the first step. You can tell because it's like, usually most people's direction that they need to go is in the areas they resist the most. And it was actually just the client that I had today in our group. I narrowed in on him. And I called him and I was like, whoa, you are so angry. First second that he heard, that's the first thing he heard from me on a call.
You felt that?
Yeah. And he said, well, you're pretty presumptuous. And I just said, am I wrong? And he goes, no, you're not. I said, did you come here
That's good.
Yeah.
Vulnerability.
There it goes,
yeah.
Right? And he said, yeah, I repress a lot of my rage. And I said, well, he's like, how do you know that? I said, well, look, on a psychological level, you're a software engineer. Most of you repress everything that you have to do because I think it's very inhumane to live that kind of life. But, you know, some people have learned to integrate that and they love it. There's like catharsis in it. And also because I can feel it, right? And so then that would be the step by which I do it. You know, sometimes when I could see even, like, for example, a lot of people like the whole pull to becoming masculine or feminine because of what it can give them. They don't really connect to the fundamental foundation of it. And this is something I realized. Some people want to see the world burn. If you're listening to this podcast, you're probably not those people. You want to find a way to add something to this world. You know, you just need to find something deeper, and it's going to take all of your heart, all of your soul, and all that you possess. And the last thing I don't want anybody to think is that they're another head in the crowd. There's a deeper component to dating, because I promise you, when you're dating, you don't want to look at your partner and go, ugh, could have done better.
Yeah.
You want to look to your partner and go, I'm not even thinking could have done better. How could I show up to this relationship?
And that's how you don't cheat.
And by the way, that's very true. You need to be really invested personally in the relationship, because the relationship serves your best interest. That's another thing for women. It's like, if you're not being told to be put in these relationships where your heart is, you serving the relationship doesn't deteriorate from you. It serves your best interest. That's how submission works. And first off, I mean, like, women don't just submit to anyone, you know?
Yeah.
But you have to just remember, it's very easy to say, I don't submit to this guy, when you have no access to even the ability to do so. That's my job, to challenge people's awareness of what they think they're ready to do, when their life has showed me they haven't been ready. And what makes you think the day is any different?
Do you think the criteria for which they're judging people upon is completely distorted?
What do you mean by that?
I think about the idea of giving the nice guy a chance. Or even...
No, never give the nice guy a chance. It never works. Safe bets are
okay, good.
dangerous.
I'm glad we're on the same page. But here's something that I hear all the time. He wasn't what I expected.
Yeah.
Like the guy I ended up with, I never thought I'd end up with this guy. And I think about that a lot, because I have certain characteristics that I'm usually attracted to and drawn to. And I wonder if they're serving me sometimes.
Do you like bad boys?
No. I love wit. I love humor. And I think that if someone can mentally stimulate me with like wit and charisma and charm, they've got me. But I don't know how sustainable that is.
I mean, there's a lot of capacity in that. There's plenty of capacity in that.
Yeah.
How's that sustainable?
I guess, okay, fine.
You talked about the bare minimum there, you know?
I like that. Yeah, so I like that. But I think that there are other qualities that I'm not necessarily looking for. Maybe that charismatic guy.
I wouldn't put it on them. I'd dive a little bit deeper here and see where exactly are my fundamental unavailabilities in relationship to my own femininity. I promise you, what you're really looking for is a masculine man. Mm-hmm. Like, you characterize that because as a form of dominance, psychological dominance. You don't just like being stimulated. You like being shown that you can be played with all of your wit and intellect.
Yeah.
I know what you're looking for.
It's resonating, yeah.
And yeah, there's plenty of capacity there. And so yeah, you're going to be more pulled to the types that have what you call psychological dominance over you. But still, you're still playing the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
Which is, okay, I like this because this makes me feel feminine.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah.
And so that's good, because you could feel safe. You know, your mind is a dangerous place. You want to know that somebody has an understanding of it, so much to the point he can make jokes, right?
Yeah.
It's good. It's cool. I think that in this case, if you're drawn to that, it also makes you feel very vulnerable. Because if you are attracted to a guy and he has wit...
Well, no, because it doesn't make me feel vulnerable, because I know I can go toe-to-toe, because I know I'm witty.
Well, then there's no vulnerability there. It's just validation.
So I have to be with someone who's not funny?
No, you have to be with somebody who's better at you than your own game.
Totally.
Yeah. But you also have to remember that you have created unavailability to that even being a possibility for you.
How do you undo that?
It's a great question. Well, you would really need to see what you reject about your fundamental femininity, or even being in that. Like, for example, let's say you did meet a guy. Handsome, charming, respectable, good family, strong values.
He wants a kid.
Witty. I mean, first off, it's a great indicator for a guy. They want children. Really good indicator.
Yeah.
I don't know why people kind of romanticize that whole idea. You will feel a lot safer as a woman with a guy that goes, I want to have children, than one who doesn't.
I can see that.
In every way possible.
By the way...
Because I'll tell you, he's actually interacting with you as a woman. Like, that's very real about what happens with sex. So he's not an idiot. Not in this regard. Or willfully delusional.
Something that I've become super open to and changed my mind about is I think I want to meet someone who has children.
You would love to do anything rather than experience your own vulnerabilities. You see, like, what I hear your resistance to children is a cultural distortion of your own nature being perceived as weak, and you kind of bit that.
I'm just like,
look,
everyone with kids looks fucking miserable and fucking tired.
I agree. And I think that's a detriment to people making decisions that they can't stand by. They look exhausted, they look tired, they look bitter, they resent their own children, and they resent their partner. That is not what I'm talking about. I am not on that team.
Do you have examples of people who are not in your life?
Extraordinary examples. I mean, my parents are an excellent example of that. My older brother and his wife, an excellent example of that. I noticed that you can create tremendous amount of exhaustion in your marriage if you do not lead your relationship appropriately as a man. The exhaustion is responsible to the man. Now, the more he neglects the relationship, like as if it's not his own internal space, it's like, how do you address somebody? Like exhaustion, all exhaustion comes with an internal turmoil, emotional turmoil. Like over long periods of time, the person becomes horizontal.
Totally. Kills them.
So it totally knocks them out. So same thing in a relationship, right? Like you don't address the needs of that relationship as a man. You will become exhausted by that relationship. You will come home to a wife that just bickers at you, and she's bitter at her own children. She's not fundamentally growing as a person. And this is for anybody who wants to know, maybe this is a third and final tip of what you're going to need for the rest of your life. Do not underestimate what a monster you can become to the people closest to you if you are not growing.
Ooh, I like that.
Your soul needs this. And by the way, it's a direct relationship to the masculine man that you're with, because it's not easy being a masculine man. And that's also another thing. That we talk a lot about the vulnerabilities of women, but we never really spoke about the vulnerabilities of men.
Because there's only 15% of them listening. But
fair.
fair.
But I feel like in a lot of ways, actually, you can harm women by not making them connected to men and make their whole process of growth self-referencing. You know, actually, men that grow in my group are typically the ones that came out of a relationship and use that relationship to reflect on what they repressed on themselves. So woman was merely the mirror for their own growth. Their relationship with women improved because they saw that even through the pain,
totally,
they grew as a man.
Yeah.
Let's dance.
Yeah.
Right? And when a man has that, he's ready to dance. Right? And so all dances are kind of two opposites coming together. He's kind of leading it. You're not a pillow princess. You're pushing back.
Yeah.
Right?
You don't know about Who Cooked Here?
Who cooked here?
It's like if you meet a guy who's got like the girly products, the face wash, a Dyson hair, dryer, you're like, what girl was here before Who Cooked Here?
Yeah, if you saw my twin brother, holy shit, he like fucking pampers himself like a chick. There's no girl, don't worry.
She didn't cook there?
No, she didn't cook there. That's all him cooking. I honestly, is so interesting because sharing a space with him growing up, it was like, I was like any other average guy, right? I'd have like my comb, my toothpaste, my toothbrush. We're good. Maybe some hair product on the weekends.
Yeah.
Dude, him, it was like fucking Sephora,
And he's single?
Yeah, I mean, he's single, yeah.
Wow. Gotta find him a girl.
You gotta find him a girl, yeah. I don't know if he'll have enough space in his bathroom for the two of them.
That's so funny. Okay. Well, I feel like, is there anything else that's kind of like on your heart? I feel like we've got some good stuff. I think we did definitely have some spirited debate.
Yeah, for sure. I still feel that there's something. Have you noticed that the debate was here to serve a function of something that's bigger than me and you? I want us to be functioning on that ground because you have a sharp mind, a really sharp mind. And also, you have to be challenged. If you're not challenged as a woman, you're neglected completely. And you're gonna need that. And I promise you, a really masculine man will challenge you. That's a good thing because you're going to feel safe that there are people that are thinking, that are actually out there who want to see beauty evolve. That's what we live to do as men.
I guess what I want people to take from this is, especially the women listening, how do you trust and make room for that masculine man? How do you, first of all, know he exists? Like, when he's in front of you, how are you cognizant that he's in front of you? Mm-hmm. And second, what do you do to make room for him in your life? Because I
have a good one.
Yeah.
Stop blaming this on your inability to trust, but your unavailability to open. Big difference.
I like that.
So many people talk about that. Oh, I don't trust him, so I'm not gonna be in my feminine frame. Oh, okay. What feminine frame? Talk about it. How connected are you to it? Oh, it doesn't exist. So you're just blaming this on the lack of trust and you made this about them? No. This has everything to do with your inability to. And most people, of course, would just address the other person for their own unavailabilities. And I think for women, what's really going to help is being able to realize, whoa, how have I manifested this rejection of my feminine in my life? And what ideologies have I adopted that protect me from my vulnerabilities as a woman that no matter how far I bury or how deep down I put it, still exists? And if it's buried deep, it functions unconsciously, and I promise you, it's the men you love and respect that love and care for you, or the ones that use you and deconstruct you.
Can we talk about tactically what that looks like of stepping into your feminine? Is it truly like ecstatic dance?
No, they come to the detriment of women. Like there was this one girl I was talking to, and she was telling me she did these like yoni exercises.
Yep.
And that she's this mystical princess, and this is who I am. I said, no, you're just an egotistical, arrogant woman. And she was like, what the fuck you say to me? And I said, you saw that? I said, that's every single part of you that's not the mystical thing that you keep telling yourself that you are. And because you bury that part of you, no man sees you for who you are. And that's exactly why they can't lead you. You believe that that part of you can't be loved. So I just wanted to trigger that part of her that was completely critical, harsh, dismissive, and the last thing you would call a mystical forest nymph now. So a lot of people like to externalize what it is to connect to things, and they never really connect to things. You know, the sports car, the muscles, the business that you have, you know, the baritone voice. But then where's your masculinity at? You know, you have a Ken doll. It's not the thing. The thing itself is connected to something deeper that allows the individual to exist with it. And that's what I want to tell everybody here, is that it's through the authentic expression of yourself you have access to what I'm talking about. Like, think about your life and who you are. And if you were really to reflect that truthfully without the narrative that protected you from your vulnerabilities as a man or a woman, then you would have all the fruits you seek. You've always had it. It's hard. It's a difficult thing. I wouldn't say that those things can help if you have an internal seed, right?
Yeah, but I also think that if we're not cognizant that we're not being authentic to ourselves, because I, for example, think I am authentic, but I'm also an open-minded person who knows I have so much growing and work to do. How do I tactically, other than therapy, journaling, breath work, yoga, like doing all these things that get me closer to my soul, my oneness, being present with my thoughts?
You don't have people making those faces when they think, huh?
No, I like it.
No,
take your time. Take your time.
I'm going to take my time with this because I dedicate weeks to help people find the step for them, right? Like,
and I do think it's case by case.
You know what? I will say a few things. Address your aversions to the things that that are perceived as feminine. Soft-spoken, tender, caring, nurturing, subservient, supportive. What do you reject about that?
I like that.
And if it's not that you reject about that, then what do you reject about the harsh, critical, dismissive, emotional, selfish? Now, these are going to be things that are really going to help you integrate. And if you can see what you reject about that, you can also see the part of you that rejects the maternal instinct of protection. And every woman's got to protect the daughter that they are. If that's not connected to a woman, you're going to be steamrolled by any man that you're with, right? You know, lions roar.
Yeah.
Lions roar. Lioness or lion, that's what you do, and that's part of the process, and there's so much fulfillment in that. And give it your best, and if you could do that every day and you could show up to that relationship and you know that you're here to really improve, and actually they're going to start doing the same with themselves. You know, parents and children typically have a difficult time because sometimes children become more aware of the parents' detriment, and the parents even become aware of their own inadequacy that are manifested in their children. And I was asked this, and it's like, how do you create change where there's just that constant clash? It's like, lead by example. The right answer is there for you. It's right under your nose. Even that small step of just addressing what you reject about it, you're going to be able to address a little more dishonesty that's manifested. And by the way, where there's dishonesty, there's no love. There's only love where there's truth. And that's why I'm team truth. Sometimes it's like, you know, you scratch your head, you're like, this is going to bite me in the ass.
Yeah.
Might throw me in prison. Yet, I really have to know what I'm protecting as a man. And when men are really connected to that, they're protecting the very thing that allows beauty to flourish, allows the evolution of goodness to begin, and that is done with women, and women embody that, and they inspire the greatness in man. And it's a beautiful synergetic dance between us. But don't think for a second that we have not been conditioned to be separate from one another. A lot of these narratives that are being told to women are protective narratives from their own vulnerabilities that allows them to actually have the relationships they want. If you're clearly here because you're looking for guidance, but I can guarantee you, name a guy that's been on this show having this conversation with you that said this.
Well, I'm so glad you came on.
My absolute pleasure. Just such a wonderful speaking with you. I love the sharpness of your questions, where you go with them.
Thank you.
You know, I only hope that you could find a man that could beat you in your own game.
Me too.
So that he can help you grow with it too, right? Oh my God, how much you can contribute together.
Will you tell everyone where they can find you?
You can find me on Instagram, Naftali Moses, just like that. My website, you can get to know a little bit about me, my background, how I help people, and YouTube. I think those are the best places to find me, to hear a little bit about my message, and you know how you can kind of get a little bit more of the tactical once you kind of start getting the conceptual. That's necessary so that you can start building a home off of a truthful foundation.
If you're resisting Naftali's thoughts, why you're resisting them.
Why you're resisting it.
And
then just please tell me everything that you rejected about it, because I would love to see it.
Totally.
I'm here to go ahead and give it a watch.
Great. Well, thank you.
My pleasure.